Hello. Thank you for joining this workshop about the MWC COVID-19 Task Force or Fund. My name is Henk Stenvers, and the last years I was Secretary of the Deacons Commission of Mennonite World Conference. There are 4 commissions in MWC: the Peace Commission, the Mission Commission, Faith and Life Commission, and the Deacons Commission. The goal of the Deacons Commission is walking with the member churches in suffering and in joy, through visits, prayer, financial support, and other means. In this workshop, I want to tell you about the COVID-19 task force that was set up in cooperation with Mennonite Central Committee to support the churches in the struggle against the unprecedented challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic that influenced our lives so deeply in the last 2 years. I will talk about the tasks, the fundraising, give examples of projects, and talk about what we learned. In January 2020, the World Health Organization, the WHO, announced that since December 2019, there was a mysterious coronavirus-related pneumonia in China, in the city of Wuhan. Within a month, this disease has spread to the US and other countries, and already on January 30, the WHO declared a global health emergency. The virus spread rapidly, and on March 11, the WHO declared a pandemic. Up till June 13, there have been 533,816,957 confirmed cases. The real number of cases will be much higher because of underreporting. There have been 6,309,633 confirmed deaths. Probably this number is also much higher. The positive thing was that the pharmaceutical companies were able to manufacture efficient vaccines very rapidly. There have been more than 11,864,214,773 vaccine doses administered up till June 7. But we have to realize that it was especially the economic wealthy countries that were able to procure enough vaccines to vaccinate a big part of the population. In the Global South, the percentage of fully vaccinated adults is much lower than in Europe or North America. It is mainly through anti-vaxxers movements that the percentages there are not higher. There seem to be enough vaccines in the Global North, unlike the situation in the Global South. One of the results of the lockdown, social distancing, and mask wearing, etc., is that the polarization in many countries has risen to worrying heights. But that is something for another workshop about reconciliation, I would think. The task force was created with the recognition that, as with most disasters, the health and economic fallout of the pandemic would be felt unevenly across the global church. Through the COVID-19 task force, MWC, in partnership with Anabaptist mission and service agencies, has not only extended humanitarian assistance, but has stood in prayerful solidarity and fellowship with Anabaptist churches ministering under exceedingly difficult circumstances in vulnerable communities across the Global South. Members of the Council of International Anabaptist Ministries, CIM, in Canada and the United States, along with European Anabaptist agencies, have supported this MWC initiative by sharing with one another about their own COVID-19 responses through prayer and through financial contributions. MWC has also received financial support for its COVID-19 fund from congregations and individuals, including contributions from individuals and churches within the Global South. Anabaptist churches in the Global South that have received assistance through the MWC fund have used these funds not only to extend mutual aid among their own members, but to continue and expand their outreach beyond themselves. The task force consisted of Alain Weaver from the US, who was the task force chair and works with MCC, Siaka Traore from Burkina Faso, who is MWC Deacons Commission chair, Joji Pantoja from the Philippines, from the Mennonite Church Canada Witness and chair of the Peace Commission, Henk Stenvers from the Netherlands, MWC Deacons Commission Secretary and Secretary of the Task Force, Max Wiedma from Switzerland, who works with the Swiss Mennonite Mission, and Pablo Stuckey from Colombia, who is MWC Regional Representative, and finally Mike Sherrill from the US, who represented CIM. MWC asked the task force to take the initiative to bring together the diverse Mennonite relief and mission organizations for sharing about the activities they undertook to support the COVID-related relief efforts, to inform and encourage each other in this situation that is new for all. And secondly, the task force was asked to propose criteria for supporting member churches financially with their COVID-19 relief projects and to decide about the support for the proposed projects. CIM agencies reinforced the efforts of the MWC Fund, assisting Anabaptist churches in several countries in their COVID-19 responses that also received support from the MWC Fund. These included Anabaptist churches in Colombia, in Congo, in Ecuador, in Peru, in Burkina Faso, in India, in Kenya, Malawi, Mesolithic Christians in Ethiopia, in Mexico, in Nepal, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And CIM agencies went beyond the reach of the MWC task force, providing support for Anabaptist churches that are not members of MWC and that were not assisted via the MWC COVID-19 fund. Examples of Anabaptist churches that did not receive MWC funds but that were able to mount COVID-19 responses with assistance from CIM agencies include churches in Trinidad and Tobago, Italian and Albanian Mennonite churches, a church in Nicaragua, in Honduras, in Panama, India, the Philippines, and Ukraine, churches in Spain, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Colombia, and Navajo Nation, and churches in Cuba. And finally, churches in the United States and Canada, and Anabaptist responses in Tanzania. In early June, the task force developed a set of criteria that it used to guide its review of proposals. These criteria included geographic diversity, with the task force seeking to support projects across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Anabaptist diversity, with the task force committed to supporting projects with churches from different Anabaptist streams, such as Brethren in Christ, Mennonite Brethren, and more. And looking to Anabaptist churches and their agencies to identify the most pressing pandemic-related needs they face at present, while also prioritizing proposals responding to basic food and hygiene needs. And priority consideration for projects reflecting inter-Anabaptist collaboration. The task force overseeing the MWC COVID-19 Fund placed a high value on initiatives that brought Anabaptist churches together in collaborative action. Examples of such inter-Anabaptist initiatives supported by the MWC funds have included inter-Anabaptist agencies in Nicaragua and in Congo, the MCSFI, the Mennonite Christian Service Fellowship in India, the Conferencia Intermennonita in Angola. In Mexico, they worked with 5 different Anabaptist churches. And in multiple contexts, different Anabaptist churches and agencies made it possible for other Anabaptist churches to receive funds via MWC, including in the Africa Inter-Mennonite Mission and the Burkina Faso Mennonite Church, championing support for the Mennonite Church in Sierra Leone, Mennonite Church in Colombia that supported projects carried out by the Mennonite churches in Peru, Ecuador, and Venezuela, and Anabaptist churches in Ecuador supporting one another in their respective responses. Of course, the danger existed that the MWC Fund might become a source of discord and division among Anabaptist churches, but instead the task force has been struck by the positive collaboration among Anabaptist churches as they have worked together and supported one another in their COVID-19 responses. For the fundraising, the work of MWC Communications was essential. Through the website, social media appeals went out to member churches and Anabaptist foundations, and also personal appeals from members of the task force in their own networks helped raise funding. Money available in the Global Church Sharing Fund at the moment of the creation of the task force was designated to the COVID relief effort. The total funds that came available during the year was $451,064. And the task force allocated money to project as money came in. A few times the task force had to put support on hold, waiting for more donations. And in the end, it was possible to support all projects that fulfilled the criteria. The task force met 20 times by Zoom to discuss the proceedings, and new proposals were discussed and could be approved or rejected or held until questions were answered. The Secretary of the Commission received the proposals, took care of informing the task force, communicated by email with the churches that sent in applications. And decisions about applications were communicated with the churches. Together with the financial administrator of Mennonite World Conference, he took care of the payment of the support. International money transfer in this scale turned out to be a very time-consuming activity. Several times it took long to receive the right data for transfers, and in a few cases we had to find other ways to get money to the churches, for example, through other organizations. The MWC COVID-19 Task Force has supported 51 humanitarian initiatives carried out in 53 national Anabaptist churches in 28 countries, with a total project value of $414,711. Some of these projects represent collaborative initiatives carried out by multiple Anabaptist churches together. So the total number of national Anabaptist churches that have implemented MWC-supported COVID-19 projects is greater than the total number of projects implemented. I want to show you a few examples of projects. For example, in India, in the province of Odisha, the BIC Church distributed health emergency packets for 700 families, 50 families in 15 regions, and in each packet there was rice, oil, dal, soap, masks, and sanitizer. And in South Africa, there was food and protection equipment distribution. In Uganda was a totally different project. There they decided to cultivate church land with our help to empower 80 women and 45 men in strengthening their livelihoods with food security. And in Brazil, there was a distribution of food and hygiene items for 560 families, and in total, so approximately 2,000 people. This is a response from a woman in Mexico who received COVID-19 aid from the church. You can see how important church solidarity with the people is. What did we learn? What has worked well? Task force members identified several positive dimensions of the MWC effort. For example, MWC's ability to provide assistance for all proposals it received that the task force determined should be supported. And the fact that churches from across many countries in Africa and Latin America from diverse parts of the Anabaptist Fellowship received support, including churches with fewer connections to the broader Anabaptist world. And to a striking degree, the task force came to decisions that all members felt they could affirm with minimal reservations. Members of the task force experienced a high level of collegial support from one another. And while the depth and detail of proposals received by MWC varied significantly, the task force was glad to see that churches were able to use more detailed proposal and report templates than have been used by the Global Church Sharing Fund in the past. And what were challenges that we saw? Well, most of the members of the task force were volunteers. So the task force was not always able to respond to proposals as timely as we had hoped. And secondly, it was already mentioned, after proposals have been approved, getting funds to churches took sometimes several more weeks. Then third, had we set a deadline for reserving proposals instead of reviewing proposals on a rolling basis, we might have been able to respond to more urgent needs first, rather than prioritizing projects from churches that had the ability to pull together a proposal more quickly. We erred on the side of providing support to more churches by setting a limit to the proposal size. It came at the expense of providing disproportionately greater support to smaller churches. At the same time, we noted some of the larger churches had pre-existing access to support from other sources beyond the MWC task force. And finally, MWC does not have staff on the ground in the vast majority of the contexts where the fund provided support. And that meant a limited capacity for direct follow-up about how the projects are unfolding. In February 2021, the task force ended her activities. Several projects by member churches came in after the closing down of the task force. The Global Church Sharing Fund took care of supporting these proposals. The experience of this global pandemic, the task force experienced that the coordination among Anabaptist mission and service agencies is vital. So the task force recommends that MWC encourages Anabaptist churches and agencies in different countries to collaborate and coordinate their efforts in addressing a pandemic. Over the time of the pandemic, the task force witnessed many examples of such cooperation and coordination in places as Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, India, and more. And we hope that such collaboration continues. The second thing is that regular meetings of Anabaptist mission and service agencies for the duration of the pandemic are important to share how they are continuing to respond across the global Anabaptist Church to the humanitarian needs that come from this pandemic. In these meetings, participating agencies can seek to identify gaps in the global Anabaptist Church's response to pandemic-related humanitarian needs and to strategize about how to address them. Since the task force stopped, MWC started the Love Your Neighbor, Share Vaccines campaign. First supporting the UNICEF COVAX vaccines distribution, and later the MCC projects in Kenya and DR Congo. You can find information on the website. I hope that I have showed you in this workshop how through the COVID-19 task force, the churches within MWC have shown solidarity to each other in their response to the needs that arose through the pandemic. In that way, they showed that they want to be one body, where as one part suffers, the whole body suffers, as is written in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 26. Thank you for watching this video workshop.